Imagine waking up one morning and nothing works. Your car won't start. The water in your pipes won't flow. You flip a switch, but the lights stay dark. It's not a war. It's not a massive storm. It's the cold itself, an invisible force that has brought America to a standstill. This is the true story of the cold wave that froze the United States solid. From the quiet suburbs to the bustling city centers, the country just stopped. People found themselves trapped, not by snowdrifts, but by a temperature so low it defied belief. This wasn't just a winter storm. This was something different. It was a wake-up call, showing how fragile our modern world can be when faced with the raw power of nature. We think we've conquered the elements with technology and infrastructure, but what happens when the one thing we can't control, the temperature, decides to drop to historic lows? This event didn't just break records. It broke our sense of security. Of course, America is no stranger to winter. We've seen snowstorms, blizzards, and icy roads. We have snowplows, salt trucks, and winter coats. But this cold wave was a different beast entirely. It wasn't just a localized storm hitting the usual suspects in the north. This was a vast, sprawling mass of Arctic air that descended across multiple states at once, plunging temperatures far below normal for days on end. What made it so unique was its reach. It hit regions that simply weren't built for a deep freeze. Think about places with mild winters, where homes aren't insulated for sub-zero temperatures and power grids aren't winterized for extreme cold. Suddenly, these areas were facing conditions you'd expect in Siberia or the Arctic Circle. The cold didn't just arrive. It invaded. It was relentless, seeping into every crack and exposing every weakness in systems designed for a climate that no longer existed. The rules of winter had changed, and nobody got the memo in time. It was a meteorological anomaly that became a national crisis. As the cold tightened its grip, weather stations began reporting numbers that seemed like typos. In cities across the country, temperature records that had stood for generations, some for over a century, were shattered one by one. We're talking about temperatures dropping to levels that were not just cold, but dangerously, life-threateningly cold. And it wasn't just the ambient temperature. The wind chill factor made it even more brutal. In some parts of the central and southern United States, the feels-like temperature was colder than in parts of Alaska or even Antarctica on the same day. The sheer speed at which this cold front moved was staggering. It outpaced the warnings, catching millions of people off guard. One day, it was a chilly autumn evening. The next, it was a full-blown Arctic nightmare. The cold reached deep into places that were fundamentally unprepared to handle it, setting the stage for a cascade of failures that would ripple across the nation. You see, extreme cold doesn't just affect people. It attacks the very systems that keep our society running. And that's exactly what happened. Power plants, the heart of our modern world, began to struggle. The demand for electricity skyrocketed as everyone cranked up their heat, but the supply started to falter. Equipment froze. Natural gas pipelines, the fuel source for many plants, experienced pressure drops as the fuel itself thickened in the cold. Transportation, the arteries of the nation, slowed to a crawl. Diesel fuel can gel in extreme cold, leaving trucks stranded. Ice on rails stopped trains. Soon, the dreaded rolling blackouts began to spread, not just for a few hours, but for days. Entire grids were on the brink of collapse. Major highways were shut down, isolating communities. Airports became ghost towns as flights were grounded indefinitely. It was in these moments that the country faced an uncomfortable truth. Our hyper-efficient, interconnected modern America was terrifyingly vulnerable to something as simple as the temperature. We had built a complex machine, but we forgot to weatherproof it against the unimaginable. With the systems failing, daily life ground to a halt. The normal rhythm of society was broken. Schools closed for days, then weeks, not because of snow days, but because it was simply too cold and dangerous for children, to even wait for a bus. Businesses locked their doors, unable to operate without power or heat. Store shelves emptied as supply chains broke down. Emergency services were stretched to their absolute limit, responding to a flood of calls for burst pipes, failing furnaces, and medical emergencies. In many regions, the worst fears were realized as residential heating systems failed. People huddled in their homes, wearing every layer they owned, watching their breath fog in their own living rooms. The water infrastructure, buried underground, wasn't safe either. Pipes contracted and burst, causing floods in homes and creating massive water main breaks that left neighborhoods without running water. The cold didn't level buildings with wind or flood them with water. It simply paused normal life, turning homes into cold traps and cities into frozen museums. So, why wasn't America ready? The problem wasn't just the cold itself. It was a failure of imagination, built on decades of assumptions. Our infrastructure was designed and built for average winters, based on historical data that didn't account for such an extreme outlier. Power grids were optimized for peak summer demand, for air conditioners, not for a winter surge that pushed the system to its breaking point. They were built for efficiency and cost-effectiveness, not for resilience against a once-in-a-century weather event. Our emergency plans were based on past disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. We had playbooks for those. But a widespread, multi-day deep freeze across a huge portion of the country? That wasn't in the manual. This cold wave didn't just break infrastructure. It broke our assumptions. It proved that relying on the past to predict the future is a dangerous game in a changing climate. It was a brutal lesson in the difference between what is probable and what is possible. After the thaw finally came, and the country slowly came back to life, the hard questions began. How could this happen? Why did our sophisticated systems fail so spectacularly? Why were so many people left in the dark and cold for so long? The event triggered a nationwide reevaluation. Investigations were launched into the power grid failures. Lawmakers and regulators started demanding answers, and, more importantly, action. The term winterization became part of the national conversation. New policies were drafted, and updated standards were proposed to force utilities to better prepare their equipment for extreme cold. The freeze left scars, but it also left lessons written in ice. It forced us to confront the vulnerabilities we had ignored and to start thinking about building a more resilient nation, one that could withstand not just the storms we expect, but the extremes we can't yet imagine. In the end, this wasn't an event that happened in the most remote, coldest place on Earth. This happened in America, a nation at the peak of its technological power. And it proved a humbling point. Even the most modern, advanced society can be brought to its knees by something as fundamental as the temperature. It stands as a stark warning. The cold will come again. The question is, next time, will we be ready? Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video